Welcome once again to the Talking Archive. I'm Josh Jacobs. By the way, check us out on Instagram at JoshDJ57. That's JoshDJ57. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Get updates when we have new podcasts, which happen usually once or twice a week on average, sometimes 3 times a week, depending on the volume of interviews we have. And our conversation continues now with Douglas C. Brown. You can check out his website at douglascbrown.com. And Doug, we've been talking about KNX-FM, Mellow Rock 93, and I love the fact that you had some early Bonnie Raitt hits, which are just not played anywhere else, but it's on your station at themellowsound.net.
Oh, yeah. Great stuff. Great stuff. And we love to go deep on people like Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and Stephen Stills' solo stuff. Dave Mason is another favorite. We play a little bit of early Traffic, but Dave Mason's solo stuff, say from 70, 71, 72, and even later, even in the later 80s, is really good. Elton John, of course, is a major, and we love to go to his kind of deeper tracks. I remember there was a couple of songs that KNX-FM was the only place you ever heard on the radio. 2 of them that come to mind were Friends by Elton John, which was the song he cut for a movie soundtrack called Friends. I think it was 1970 or 71. And nobody played it. It's a great little 2.5-minute song with a great Paul Buckminster strings and like that. And KNX-FM was the only one to play it. And then there was that album that Jeff Wayne did called War of the Worlds, where Justin Hayward of the Moody Blues cut that song Forever Autumn. Was part of this double album, which with Richard Burton narrating the story of War of the Worlds. It was all a rock and roll opera kind of production. But this Justin Hayward's song, and obviously his voice is very associated with the Moody Blues, but Justin Hayward did this solo thing called Forever Autumn. I remember that was one of those exclusive KNX-FM songs. You never heard it on the radio anyplace else. So it's fun to bring those back too, and we get comments about that kind of song because it's nowhere ever since, because it wasn't a hit single. It doesn't appear in the Billboard charts, and so if you've got a 30-something programmer out there trying to put together an oldies format or even an AOR, an album rock format or something, they're going to miss a lot of this stuff because they weren't there. They didn't live it, they didn't. And it doesn't diminish the value of these things. It's kind of like I look at it. It's like early paintings by Vincent van Gogh or somebody that at the time weren't appreciated, right? But now everybody goes, "Wow, that's a masterpiece," right? At the time he couldn't sell them, right? and so I look. A lot of this music is the same way, It's like just because the timing wasn't right for that to be a hit single at the time, does it deserve to be thrown away? I don't think so. That's why we like to, kind of emphasize the fact that this is a hand-picked, curated playlist here of sometimes pretty obscure artists. Most of whom had major labels, but didn't get promotion at the time. I always thought that's wonderful when you try and figure out why this song that sounds very commercial, and at the time, why wasn't it on the radio? I mean, we were just coming across. What was one we were just discussing? Was I know. Here's a song that was a big hit in Europe, but never for some reason didn't click in the U.S. It was that song by the artist was called Smokey. It's called "Lay Back in the Arms of Someone." Now you listen to that, and it looks, and you compare it to the other stuff that was a top 40, top 10 hit in 1977. You're going, that fits perfectly. What it's very melodic. It sounds like Badfinger. It has that kind of acoustic quality about it and harmony. And you think, why didn't that click? Isn't that interesting? And you think, well, it probably had to do with the fact that the record label had other promotional priorities at the time. They had 2 or 3 other artists where they needed to spend their money. And so that one, even though it was sonically correct and the right length and, would work and was a hit in Europe, it didn't work here. And I think that's a very interesting element of the record business, how that happened.
There's another great song. I don't know if KNX-FM ever played it, but it's a great song. I had it on my white 8-track tape when I was a little kid. I called it the white tape. I mean, it had no Beatles songs, but it had songs like Bell Bottom Blues and Layla by Derek and the Dominoes. It had Benny and the Jets by Elton John. And it also had a song called Queen of Hearts by Greg Allman. It was off of his Laid Back album. Everybody my dad's played that song for has loved it. I still enjoy it to this day.
Now that's not the same song as Juice Newton's hit version, right?
I don't think it is, but I can't tell you for certain.
But the Laid Back album, we played Midnight Rider from that album, and that's a great track. But I don't know that one. Queen of Hearts or Queen of My Heart?
Queen of Hearts by Greg Allman. Yeah, it's a great song. And I still love listening to that song. It's just it's kind of like this jazzy blues rock. It would fit the KNX-FM sound definitely. And just, wow. So if you want to check that out, if I hear it, I'll know why.
Yeah, I'll look it up. That sounds interesting. Greg Allman, seems to me we're playing. Let me see. I'm just looking on the playlist here, see what we have on from him. I guess Midnight Rider may be the only one. I know I think we're playing. There's an instrumental. We're playing as well, but and that was an authentic one we heard off a playlist. It'd be not the kind of thing you just pick up on instantly unless it was authentic. So anyhow, I'm going to look up Queen of Hearts for Greg Allman. That sounds very interesting. But as far as I'm concerned, this is what I'm doing these days, and it's really really for the love of the music. Really, that's what it's all about. And this idea of curating these album collections, I personally have thousands of albums on hand, and of course we use CDs and singles too, whatever it takes to put it together. But again, we just looked around and said the music business needs some more mellow music, and this is it. One guy called in and says, I missed the station so much when it went away, and I haven't lived in Southern California for a long time. He says, but I realize I don't know the artists and the songs, but when I hear it, I find myself singing along. It's like we got into their subconscious without them listening for a back and outs or any of that stuff. And that is, of course, the beauty of today is all the artists and titles are displayed on whatever digital device you're using, smart TV or whatever. And so the whole idea about having to back announce them all, removes the clutter. We run jingles and promotional announcements and things, but we don't have to do all the back announcing and such that used to be. Although sometimes I wish we could, but it would be so much labor to do all that. As the volunteer crew, we're not going to go to that level. That's not going to happen. But
I know that looking at the old KNX-FM back in the 70s, if I was an advertiser, I would have loved it because you had 4 songs, 2 commercials, 4 songs, 2 commercials, and the commercials fit the vibe of the station itself. And then oftentimes the DJ, whoever was on the air, was tagging the commercial. So it really felt like you were part of it. It didn't feel like a sudden, train wreck.
Yeah, exactly. One of the more innovative things that KNX-FM did when it comes to those long-form song jingles was they used to use it to break up the commercial sets. You'd hear two spots and then a jingle and then another spot and then back to the records. And I thought that was so clever to put that low-key branding. They wouldn't always play there's lots of edits of these jingles. There's long, medium, short versions. But they'd usually not put the full, say, 60-second version in a stop set, but they'd put in the 20-second jingle in between commercials. And I thought, wow, that's really innovative. That's clever, without screaming in the audience's ear, not hitting them with a shotgun jingle. Like Cage or K-Earth or something. You're reinforcing the branding in a very low key way, even though you're stretching out the stop set. It's very musical, So I thought that was very clever. Also, KNX-FM back in the day would actually require certain advertisers to cut their commercials in a lower key way. If you can believe that. You remember Tom Campbell, who used to do the Dow or Now stereo spots. He used to do these fast-talking, hard-sell commercials for radio and TV equipment, VCRs, cassette machines, turntables, yada, 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 yada. He would just scream those things. And also, he always had a tendency to record. When he recorded those, they were always a little bit long. He'd always try to get 63 seconds instead of 60. At KHJ, we wouldn't let him get away with that. But anyway, on KNX-FM, he would cut lower-key versions of the same copy or similar copy, knowing that the station just had high standards for this continuity, that they would reject the screaming used car dealer kind of commercial.
Was this the Bay Area personality, Tom Campbell?
Yeah, that was him. Tom, he was a fast-talking top 40 disc jockey with the best of them. But those Cal stereo commercials were... They were quite a deal. He bought a lot of time on KHJ. I mean, I can remember he'd deliver 3, 4, 5, 60-second commercials a week. He was buying a lot of time on KHJ at the time, probably about, 75, 76, that kind of time frame. And I remember that he was always trying to squeeze in that extra time. They'd be coming in at 63 seconds or something. So what we tried to do is subtly speed the tape a little bit so it would fit in 60, but that made him sound like a mouse, which was really unacceptable. So we got this Eventide harmonizer, which was an early digital device that would allow you to change the pitch. So what we could do is speed up the tape and then drop the pitch a little bit, but it left artifacts. That was kind of a primitive machine. It would leave digital artifacts, unfortunately. That never worked very well. So what I do remember is having to lean on him to make sure he cut those things. When he cut them at 60, they were 60. We didn't want to edit them, but, on the other hand, we had standards. So there was a lot of that conversation going back and forth. Oh, I've got one more story to tell you about edits. You'll like this. This is a good one. You remember the song Lonely Boy by Andrew Gold?
I do.
All right, that was a hit. All right, mid-chart hit, not a huge hit. Anyway, when KHJ added it, that was a story song, and it lasted about 4 minutes and 40 seconds, as I remember. Pretty long record. Anyway, at the time, the program director, who I mentioned earlier, wouldn't add songs that were that long. So he said, try an edit. So I did an edit, and it wasn't bad. Tried to keep the essence of the song together and to get it under like 335. Well, we put it on the air that way. Well, the next thing I know, a couple days later, Andrew Gold calls up the station, and nobody wants to talk to him, so I ended up getting him in my ear. He's yelling, "You butchered my song! You cut up my song!" Blah, blah, blah. I said, well, unfortunately, that's our policy, is that it's too long. He says, okay, what if I do my own edit? And I send it over. I said, okay, fine. Okay. A couple days later, a 15 inches per second stereo reel-to-reel shows up of Lonely Boy with the Andrew Gold edit. Well, he cut the thing down to 2.5 minutes. It went like verse, chorus, out. And it was like, wait a minute. This totally took this is a story. You got to tell the story, right? So the PD and I listened to it, and we went, oh, no, I don't think so. So even though it's the artist edit, we'll just go with mine. We was stuck with my edit. And it turned out to be a mid-charter. It wasn't a huge record, so, it was no great loss. But I always thought that was really an interesting call that I had to deal with back when it came to editing music. My other one that I thought was really clever had to do more with listeners than with artists. When Another Brick in the Wall was a hit for Pink Floyd, right? We wanted to play that, but we didn't. The way it was on the album didn't make sense because it went off into another song between part 2 and part 3 or whatever, right? So there was a promo single of the thing that had an instrumental intro, whereas the album didn't. So I said, well, I'm going to do a clever edit here. I'm going to use the intro from the single, then I'm going to use the body of part 2 and then go down, do an edit to part 3. So I can do a nice, tidy edit. It's about, under 4 minutes, maybe about 4 minutes or something. So I did that, and it worked great, actually. It sounded really good. It sounded better than just their single, which just faded out at part 2, whereas when you do another brick part 3, it actually ends. It actually resolves. So it was a tidy single. So we played it that way, and it was a big hit, got a lot of airplay. But at least twice I can remember I got calls from a listener who got to the front switchboard and threw the call back to me to answer the question saying, I went to the store to buy this, and it doesn't sound like what you're playing KHJ. And I said, well, you're right. That was a custom edit we did just for the radio station. They said, well, can I buy that one? Oh, well, no. I can't sell you that one. Sorry. You could air check it. Roll your tape on KHJ, and I'm sure you'll catch it. But I think that happened just with 2 listeners on that particular song, and it always made me wonder how many people went out to buy the record after hearing it, and whether it was Funky Town by Lip Sync or this or some other song, they'd get home and they'd be disappointed thinking, oh, that's not what it sounded like on the radio. Well, you are right. And anyway, so that's 2 of my music edit songs that I thought were kind of entertaining.
Wow. Since KNX-FM has such a wide playlist, when you did Oldies on KRLA back in the early 80s, how many songs were on the playlist for the Oldies format that you were part of?
Wow, that's interesting. I actually have a playlist from that period right here, but I never counted them. I've got an alphabetical list by artist. Oh my gosh, it's so many pages. And it was interesting because some of it was in the library, just say for the Countdown show, John Hayes' show or something, or for a special weekend, but wouldn't be in regular play. Like we do a surf weekend or something, and so you'd play some surf instrumentals and stuff like that weren't in regular rotation. So the size of the library probably could be misleading as to what you would hear on any given week. So if I had a number to throw at you, it would probably not be accurate because it was pretty deep.
Oh, okay.
And I remember we were doing the Beatles Hour with Dave Hull. We were doing Beatles Hour for a couple of years, and we'd play all the obscure album tracks and B-sides and all this stuff that would not be in regular rotation, obviously, but they were available, sitting there waiting to be, on cart, almost always, ready to be played if needed. So it's hard to say how many were in regular rotation on KRLA in those days, but it was sizable.
That's good because back, in the 90s and 2000s, under the program directorship of Mike Phillips and Larry J. Coffey, KRLA was, as people joked, the same 101 oldies over and over again. So I thought that KRLA had a much bigger playlist than that because I remember they had a bigger variety when I listened to it when it was still oldies in the 90s before it flipped to talk around 1998.
Yes, that's true. KRLA was always much more tightly controlled. Again, they do a special weekend. Like I remember when Brian Byrne was there, we were still doing stuff like Elvis's birthday, and we go deep into Elvis tracks and such, But the general library on KRLA, it seems like it always kept getting smaller, based on research or listening habits of the audience, and KRLA always had much more variety. Again, it had that East LA soul and Latino sound mixed with the surf and the beach thing and the British invasion all mashed together, and I always thought that was very interesting, and it was a very unique position for KRLA to be in.
We're in conversation with Douglas C. Brown. His website is douglascbrown.com. And next time, Doug talks about growing up and knowing the founder. His family knew the founder of Bob's Big Boy. We'll hear some great stories about the early days of Big Boy restaurants as well as their founder next time.